This episode is brought to you by Rakuten. If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of the hunt. But are you getting the thrill of the best deals? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love with the most savings and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Samsung, Expedia, and Sephora. And even stack sales on top of cash back. It's easy to use, and you get your cash back through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten.
Support your immune system with Airborne's most complete immune support formula yet. Airborne's delicious effervescent tablets are packed with 7 powerful ingredients to fill the holes your immune system may have, so that you can enjoy those unmissable moments in your life. Learn more at airbornecomplete.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, it's given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, behind-the-scenes stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, films manage to get made. What you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest release and or their body of work. You're getting a bit of both here. I've not heard many long-form interviews with this particular person. It's the Oscar-winning director, Vicky Jenson. And her name came up as a possible interviewee. I was just like, why is her story not better known? I've tried to do something about that here. Her first film, she wins an Oscar for Shrek. Her second film is the massive hit Shark Tale. I mean, she's directing Martin Scorsese in that animated movie, made at DreamWorks at the point where Jeffrey Katzenberg was overseeing DreamWorks animation as well. Then she does a live-action movie, Post-Grad. One of the producers there is Ivan Reitman. His name is going to come up. That doesn't do box office gold, and as she's going to talk about, she heads to director's jail, which, again, I'll let her put that in her words. And what I'm talking about now, I mean, the reason she's out and about now talking about her career is her latest movie is the animated movie Spellbound, which has been made over at Skydance Animation. So Skydance Animation, you hear the name David Ellison, who's the head of Skydance. John Lasseter's name pops up. He's the head of Skydance Animation. And there's also Disney legends like Linda Wolverton and Alan Menken. I think they come up in the conversation as well. It's a little bit spoilery in a film where I don't really think the spoilers matter personally, and I certainly left that up to Vicky Jenson to decide that. So I do want to just pre-warn you with that she's openly talking about a lot of the movie, and again, she's perfectly fine with that, and so I leave it up to the filmmaker on that, but I figure you might want to know. As always, I'm going to set the conversation up with a clip from the trailer from the film. The other side of this, you'll hear my conversation with Oscar-winning director Vicky Jenson.
Hey, Alien! Wait up!
to Lumbria. My mom and dad were king and queen. Woohoo! Until a dark spell was cast upon them.
We can't keep this secret much longer. Your kingdom needs a real ruler.
I know. Dad, put him down. Mom? I just really miss you both.
If they don't change back soon, dark magic will spread through the kingdom, and you will never get your parents back.
I'm not gonna let that happen.
Troops! Close the gates!
Flink, do something!
That was a clip from Spellbound. And I'm joined by, for this Film Stories podcast special, by its director. It's Oscar-winning Vicky Jenson. Hello, Oscar-winning Vicky Jenson, which is your official name.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so
you
much.
Should.
For putting that on a card.
Do you think if I'd have won an Oscar, it would have been the first word you'd ever hit? So you won an Oscar, and all power to you. I want to start this conversation with. I've got sound like I'm in a meeting, don't I? I want to start this conversation with Spellbound, if possible. Then go back in time, and then come back to Spellbound. That's my cunning plan. So I don't see too many long form interviews with you, and so I'm really interested in your story.
Well, I'm very long-winded, so that's surprising.
I can defeat you on that, as you're about to find out. You gave a quote once where you said that you're not an animator, you're a storyteller. And your career, I mean, your directorial debut was Shrek, which I'm sure we'll come to shortly. And then you've had a career that's gone off in all sorts of directions, and you've come back to animation. Can I ask why? Was it the lure of animation, or was it the lure specifically of this story?
You know, funny, I didn't mean to leave animation. I just,
Right.
I love a new challenge. I love trying things, in my life that are different and well, challenging to me. But it really was this story, Skydance came to me and asked me to come in and listen to a pitch of a couple of stories. And one of them was this idea of a princess. At the time, it was a kind of a little different story, but the nugget was the same inside. It was a story of a princess whose mom and dad were, monarchs of different kingdoms, and they were at war, and she was going back and forth between the two kingdoms. And, in the end, she was going to, save the world, but not save the parents' marriage. So, and it was all a big fantasy, right?
Yeah.
So we kept so much of that, in this movie. It is a fantasy world. There are a king and queen that are at war because they're monsters. So rather than wearing the story on its sleeve, we wanted to find the sort of the metaphor for it. This was something that happened once I joined and started developing the story with our team. And when John Lasseter came in, gave us another opportunity to strip that story down and really look at how we might tell the story. And together we hit on this metaphor of the spell turning the parents into monsters and the kid feeling like it's up to them to fix it, to break that spell.
So us mere mortals on our side of the fence, the first I got wind that this was a thing was a trade press report in July 2017. And presumably the rule of a trade press report is it's been in your life for a degree longer before we get to that point. I've also found interviews where you talked about you were writing your own stuff in the mid 2010s, looking to write and direct some stuff yourself. So can you just take me into the mid 2010s and why this kind of superseded and how early this was in your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, after Shark Tale, then after a live action movie I did called Post-Grad.
Come into that. Watch that today. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
I did. Yeah. 3 stars, Roger Ebert.
Yes. One positive review we got.
Yes. Yeah, but
found it.
But what a positive review. He wanted a sequel. I read that. He wanted a sequel.
Sweetie pie. That was a fabulous experience. And I learned so much on each project. It would have been great to keep doing more of them, but I got thrown in director jail because the movie didn't really make any money. And women tend to spend a little bit more time in director jail than men.
I was going to bring this up because
Yeah, and even if
as
we
a
don't,
go on, sorry. Now I'm talking over you, so I'm playing
oh,
every
no,
cliche. Right, I'm going to shut up.
even though some of us don't lose the studio as much money as some of the fellas on these gigantic movies, they were getting more, the next movie anyway. And I couldn't get anyone to even let me direct an episode of something. So
Well, did he get that bad?
yeah, it did. So no, but I was happy to try to write things. I was writing a live action movie that was about, do you remember the movie The Commitments?
Yeah, 1991, Alan Parker.
Yes,
The whole trilogy of those is great.
Oh.
The best bit is when they're singing about Elvis, and and the guy just turns around and is fucking blasphemy. Love it.
Oh, it was fantastic. So I had this one story that was like The Commitments in reverse. My husband's in Irish music in San Diego, right? And I love the Irish music scene, Irish music and Irish rock.
Interesting.
So I had a group of Latino kids, because I'm from Latino background.
Yeah.
Who were like, they decided they could do Irish music. So instead of a bunch of Irish kids doing, Motown, it was going to be a bunch of Latino kids from like El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and everything. And they were they broke into the Irish music scene and they won the big festival. So it was super, super fun. Somebody gets deported, just not the one you think.
Okay. And is that still happening somewhere?
I hope so.
Okay. How much do you need? You never know. There might. Well, let's get to the. Much. Okay, let's get to the number. There might be a billionaire listening to this. You never know.
But it was fun to work on these kind of projects. I needed to stay active creatively. So, and then there was a big animated, adaptation that I was trying to work on from the 12 Dancing Princesses. That was a gender flip on that, and all kinds of things. But that's what everybody does in Hollywood. They're all, there's so many writers, so many directors, so many filmmakers. It's amazing anything actually does get made, because so many of us are trying to convince people this is a good idea. But honestly, when Skydance approached me about this, it wasn't so much yay animation as it was, wow, I love this story. I love what could be possible.
I got told that the skill of a good interview, from my point of view, is listening and trying to grab onto the strands and abandon your questions and try and follow the strand. I've got no chance. That's 6 or 7 really interesting things you've just thrown in my direction. Can I segue just for a second? Vicky Jenson, have you put your Christmas tree up?
Oh, no, I'm at a hotel in New York because we had our
God for that. I was going to say, thank you. 13th of November, and there's a Christmas tree up. But
the hotel put it in my room.
I tell you
that's crazy.
This won't come across in audio well, but you can kind of. Oh no, it's fine. I can see it.
And it's pretty, and it's in the doorway here between the bedroom and the little entryway. It's very cute.
When I go to a nice hotel, I can barely shut my suitcase, all the lovely things on the way out. It's just like I'd never get a tree in there. I do want to zero in on something to do with Spellbound, because you put, and I'm a very spoiler-like podcast, which means I can't ask you questions about the last third of the film. I really want to ask you.
I already gave it away.
Yeah, but I didn't, and I don't even give the ending away to The Empire Strikes Back in the stuff I do. I'm kind of that allergic. Don't tell me what happens. But you put a director's statement in there, and one of the lines in there, I'm going to read it for that, because I guess listeners won't have heard this. Our goal was to have the audience experience the story through the feelings of our characters. While we felt there'd be conversations after the lights came back on, it would be those feelings that reveal the truth of the fairy tale. If there is love, then there is family, no matter how that family is composed. And there's a sentence in there that really got me. And it was, while we felt there'd be conversations after the lights came back on. Because I think we're in an era where a reasonable number, and I'm not naming names, and there's no snobbishness or anything like that, a reasonable number of films, certainly family films, you could denote as surrogate babysitters. Put someone in front of it, it'll keep them occupied for 90 minutes. I'm a parent, films like that are absolute gold. But there's no chance of a conversation after. The film stops at the credits, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. Your intent here, presumably, if I go right the way back to, I don't know, meeting you and Linda Wolverton, who came up with the idea, as I understand, would have had right near the start. You pulled a face there, so I'm gonna shut up and let you fill in that in a second. I just want to get to the point though of, was it always the intent that the conversation takes place after the film?
Well, the intent is for families to see this together.
Yeah.
The parents are not vilified in the movie. We actually don't have a traditional villain because the story isn't about that. The
That's
story is
true. That's
the
true.
conflict of the story is the situation and how does the family come through it intact somehow. So, at one point we had the title, The Unbreakable Spell. The spell is
Okay.
not breakable, but for me, that also had the other meaning of that love. If the family has love, it's the love that's unbreakable, even if that family itself looks broken, and that was always true about this movie, that the story would not parent trap
Yeah.
the ending. Now, the actual story was conceived in Spain by a group of a couple of writers and artists there at the studio where we ultimately animated the movie.
Yeah.
And it was the nugget of the story that stayed, that spoke to David Ellison. He has often said that he's never seen his story up on the screen. He comes from a family where divorced, and he was quite young and just never really got to see that up on the screen. And so that idea was presented to me, and that first script, Linda's first script was a big world, which we've kept, a big, fabulous fantasy epic world, but it was pretty dense. It had two kingdoms. They were at war. The young princess was going back and forth between her mom and her dad. There was a lot of magic. There was a villain laying pressure on everything, and it was just a little bit complicated. When I started to sort of peel back a bit to find what was unique about the story, that the heart of it. And when John Lasseter came in, it was another opportunity to really peel back. Let's put this on a shelf. Maybe we don't need that magic just yet. We don't need the world at war right now. Let's focus in on this story. And together we evolved this metaphor or fairy tale take on it, where that's when we came up with the spell that cursed the parents and turned them into monsters. Because to the kid in a situation like this, that's what it feels like. Why are they yelling? Why are they fighting? Why can't I fix this? Maybe if I'm just a better kid, maybe if I do my homework or look after mom, they'll stop. Kids feel like it's up to them to fix this family dynamic. So here we have a heroine who believes it's up to her to break the spell, and we have these two oracles that tell her it's not you that can do it. They have to do it. And that was actually the biggest challenge, because in traditional storytelling, your hero goes on a journey and fixes things and takes action and solves it and fixes the world. And we can't say that. That would be parent trapping this movie. It's not for the kid to try harder to fix their parents.
Isn't that? I mean, you've turned parent trap into a verb for a start. I'd not heard that before, but I'm still stuck at the bit that there's no villain, and I'm just wondering, when you're breaking your story down, how much of it? Because by the sounds of it, you go small until you found what it is you really love about it. Again, that's my perception of what you've just said. But it's I don't know. Do you, once you bracket off what you're not allowed to do, how tough does the challenge get? Because presumably throwing in a villain would have been quite easy, just to kind of push things in certain directions, but you're looking to organically shift this in a slightly different way.
Well, it was paring back really to find the core, not so much small, but to find the truth. Okay, what is the honest truth of the story, and how do we treat that with the respect and the honesty that it deserves? So we started to work with a family therapist, a family psychologist named Joanne Pedro Carroll. So she wrote a book called Putting Children First.
Yeah.
And one of our producers found her. And she works exclusively with families going through separation and divorce. And I know this is a spoiler, but it's a podcast.
It's your film. You can do what you like. You can do what you like. It's your film.
We're discussing it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So she really guided us on, look, this is how kids often feel. Like
Yeah.
it's up, like they caused it because they hear whispered voices behind the wall. And their name comes up, like, yes, but what about Sally? What are you going to do about Sally? Or whatever. And the kids just, they feel like they're somehow the cause of it when the parents don't talk to them. They feel like they can fix it, if they're just a better kid and they could stop the fighting. And the parents have forgotten to listen because they're so caught up in their own animosity to each other. They forget, so her book, Putting Children First, really helped, so in many ways, helped me and the team structure our journey. How can the family find
really
its way back to each other? The parents are monsters in the beginning, and they've forgotten that they are human. They've forgotten that they're kings. They've forgotten queens. They've forgotten that they have a daughter. They're just animals. They're just, and as they regain their humanity, first voices, which is very funny when they first learn how to speak, they still don't know who they are or who she is to them. So it had to be a slow move for them to come back and understand and finally see how to parent her, how important that was, that they forgot to parent her. And so, template wise, like how musicals work, it was a bit groundbreaking on the movie too. And Alan Menken will acknowledge that. He's extremely proud of this movie and knew right away this was going to be completely different. So without a villain, we don't have that famous villain song.
Yeah.
But we have our hero sing from a place of real betrayal, a sense of betrayal, and a real sense of anger, justified anger. We're not trying to tell anybody you don't get to feel big feelings like this. But, just don't let them take over your life, right? The way the parents did. They made themselves monsters. And Alien, our lead character, played by Rachel Ziegler, she gets that sort of villain-like song at the end of the movie. And it's very unexpected. You don't see that in a musical. You don't see a hero vent like that. But this is a teenager, and she's completely justified in feeling this way because the parents forgot about her.
An incredible answer to a question that was nowhere near good enough to warrant it. And so I mean, as promised, I'm going to zip you back a bit, if that's okay, because I know I'll come back to Spellbound towards the end, but I did just want to make sure we got all that. I mean, I spoke to Jennifer Hugh Nelson, who I think is a brilliant filmmaker, several times. And she took the part of her story I found really fascinating was she went to, I mean, I used to work in a petrol station, and we used to have animated films sold on videotape that were just knockoffs of whatever Disney was making at that time. And from what Jennifer Hugh Nelson told me, she worked on stuff like that. She worked on the small animation houses where you would do a whole bunch of jobs. And you would just learn your trade that way because you got your hands on lots of levers very early, even if they weren't, in the nicest sense, particularly impressive levers. I then think, I wonder what your background is. And I load up your filmography, and I wasn't expecting Wayne Wang. I wasn't expecting John Hughes. I wasn't expecting Don Bluth and names like this, possibly Don Bluth. I mean, that would...
No, not Don Bluth.
Was that
Ralph Bakshi.
Ralph, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, names like these weren't necessarily the ones I would expect on the career trajectory that you went along. I read that when you went into DreamWorks for the first time, you had a view that even at that stage you wanted to direct. That you knew. So if I go back to your first credit that I find here, 1985's The Secret of the Sword, for instance, a film I'm not massive, the He-Man film, where were, because I understand working on He-Man for you was like the turning point where you realized you wanted to direct. I'm just curious, where were you in 1985? You were 17 years away from an Oscar. If I zipped back through some magic time travel technology, where would your ambition be there? What kind of stories were you looking to tell?
Wow, that's amazing. I'd have to think back to the movies that were inspiring to me at the time. In animation, I had just seen like Nausicaa, Warriors of the Wind.
Oh, heck. Right. Okay.
And, it didn't feel like little kid fare. It felt like a movie for everybody, just told in animation. And it was just so magical. And I just loved that the girl and the little critter that she tames.
Yeah.
She lets it bite her, and then she endures the pain, right? It's biting her finger, and then it feels bad and realizes she's not going to fight, lets go, and then licks the little drop of blood. And I just thought, oh my God, this is my world. That's where I want to be. That's the world I want to be part of. To be able to bring a moment like that on screen would be amazing. And so, working on He-Man, the TV show, and I think they just adapted a lot of our work into the movie. I honestly, it was so long ago, I don't remember where the show dropped off and the movie, came up. But I was one of the very few women in the story department, creating storyboards from the scripts. And it taught me so much about filmmaking. I couldn't watch movies the same way again after that. I was looking at, oh, you could cut here. Oh, you could do a close-up there. Oh, wow. So that's when I got the idea that I think I really want to direct. I want to be a part of, shaping the whole thing. And so I started figuring out, like, well, what's the trajectory to become a director? And one of them is to be a story artist on a feature film. Yeah, because you get up and you pitch the movie, you act things out, you kind of give everybody a sense of how the scene could work, how it could be paced, how it could feel, how the characters could talk. So they can see whether you could lead everyone in a direction. And I'm a big ham, so it was a really good fit for me on El Dorado when I got into DreamWorks to storyboard. And then, but my career, I bounced back and forth between art direction and story work because I loved both. I'd never really animated. I wasn't an animator, so I didn't have that much patience.
But lack of patience isn't necessarily a bad quality, though, is it?
No, you need patience. Look, I've been on this movie 7 years. I
was coming to that.
For patience.
7 years. I mean, there's got to be something you absolutely love to cling on to something. I mean, it can't just be I need a job if you're clinging on for 7 years to one.
No. And I'm not just clinging like Jack to a hunk of driftwood in the icy Arctic. It was really I'm on the ship trying to forge through the fog.
I'm writing these down. So we've turned the parent trap into a verb. Now we're going for Titanic. This is great. I mean, you posted on Instagram what sounded like an exhausted response, and you've touched on it before. So I want to bring it up to what it was like being a female director and what it is like being a female director and being in interviews like this and being asked the same questions over and over and over again. And so obviously I'm now crossing off all of the questions. No, I wasn't actually going to ask that what's it like being a woman and B directing, as if it's like these are some magical elixirs that the streams that should never cross. The one I do want to ask though, because you brought up Post-Grad, and I also tried to find your short film that you did in 2003 as well, which I can't find anywhere you were making. I can't find it. I tried.
It's broken on my link on my.
I have to
fix the link. Apple used to have it.
Or Vimeo doesn't. Yeah, Vimeo
Amazon dropped it. They dropped all their shorts for 15 years. They had shorts and they dropped them.
Good old Amazon.
But I got to fix that link because it's a.
If you've directed two major hit animated films, notwithstanding the fact you were doing a live action short in the middle of them, the questions generally, I wonder what you were being asked around Post-Grad. Was it kind of questions along the lines of what's it like directing a live action film, as if animated films aren't involved in people? Don't involve people for one, but also I'm curious, when it came to directing live action, lots of animation directors tell me that they've made their film right from the start and then they're executing the film. I'm just wondering how you approached the live action movies that you made and the live action work that you've done, and if you have to just if you have to, I don't know, rid yourself a little bit, or do you still go in with absolutely everything prepared to the nth degree?
Well, first of all, I think my extensive, exhaustive feeling of that quote wasn't about being asked questions over and over again. It was about that specific question.
I understand.
Yeah,
I
about being,
understand.
what's it like being a woman director. No, because I love answering questions about my projects because I'm proud of
I
them,
get that. I get that.
But yeah, the experience of doing live action, yes, a lot of animation directors I can imagine walk in with the whole movie storyboarded
Mm.
and everything prepared. I do prepare my scenes, all the questions I think I might get, and I think about them ahead of time. What would I do if this comes up with an actor? How do I want it to look? So yes, with visually, I try to work with the DP and the production designer, like, okay, yeah, these are the ideas I have. But when it comes to the actors, I don't want them parroting my specific, whatever line reading I might have in my head. And I don't work that way in animation either. So it's much more, it's a collaboration. It's understanding what the characters in this particular scene want. What are they trying to get? And then how the actors want to get it. That I love that that's up to them, the tactics that they choose to do it, so things change. And I love that about live action. You think you're going to shoot outside, it starts raining. So how are we going to transfer it inside? And I love that kind of very quick problem solving. It was super, super fun. But I did have a little left over from my animation, the way we work in animation where we pre-edit, because you do not animate coverage. One, it's too
Yeah, of course.
expensive, and two, the animators will kill you and then they kill themselves. So you cannot animate coverage. So you have to pre-edit before you animate. So all decisions are made in storyboard and the sort of layout phase. But it's different, obviously, in live action. But I was still kind of thinking that way, like, oh, I think I know how this scene will go. I love it that the foot comes out of the car and you don't see the guy's face until, the camera comes up to him or the door opens after he arrives. And so I didn't shoot a guy coming out of a car. I shot a shoe coming out of a car, a foot. And then it's Ivan Reitman who said, look, your ideas are great. It's probably going to be really funny, but stop editing in the camera.
Yeah.
You need the coverage. You need to give yourself choices in case that idea doesn't work. That idea is funny, but you need to be covered. So like, okay, yeah. Okay, I learned that one. Things.
I mean,
yeah.
Reading the credits of Post-Grad, I saw Ivan Reitman's name in there. I saw Tom Pollock's name in there as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
his editor too. Yeah.
But there's also one of our most underrated filmmakers in there as well, Kelly Freeman, who I think is now Kelly Freeman Craig.
She was our writer. Yeah.
Yeah. The Age of 17, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret. She's done a couple of
beautiful
films.
Beautiful work.
But doesn't seem to get many films. Which I mean, all roads sort of lead back. And when you were talking about, because I think I can say without offending you that Post-Grad wasn't a box office office juggernaut. I mean, I enjoyed the film. It still exists, which is no small feat given how many films from the 2000s are being deleted at the moment. That's a whole bugbear of mine at the moment. Yours is available on Disney Plus here in the UK. I do recommend people go out and check it. I think it's a whole lot of fun. You mentioned, I looked at the work of someone like Rachel Talalay, for instance, in the 1980s, and a groundbreaking filmmaker in a couple of ways. But she did, if you look at the people who directed the Elm Street sequels, I think Rennie Harlin did one, Stephen Hopkins did one, that she did one, and then everyone else got a Joel Silver movie, but her.
Yep.
She made Tank Girl, which was messed around by a studio. Yes. And then when heavily messed around by a studio, and then when that doesn't work out, she's in director jail and can't get out. And you've made the part. I look at your career and I'm amazed more people don't do long interviews with you, because I look, you've got an Oscar, you've got 2 massive hit movies. This film is a delight. Spellbound is also a delight. I mean, I'm loath to ask you about the frustration of it, because I'm a middle-aged, boring white man, but I feel almost like I mean, it must just drive you up the bloody wall.
Well, you can't let yourself get taken over by the darkness, as we've learned from Spellbound. It is frustrating, but at the time it was what it was. And we watched things begin to change.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement that women spend more time in director jail, that people tend to see a director as the captain of a ship and they must be male. You almost feel like there's more trust somehow in a male pilot on a plane than a female pilot on a plane. And it's absurd in this day and age that that's still there. People sometimes still refer to women doctors instead of a doctor.
It's the riddle at the start of Tin Cup. I played it to my 11-year-old son, the riddle about the two doctors on the bridge, which if anyone's not seen, go and check out the riddle. It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's like an audit.
Crazy. And I grew up in a world like that where there were more men working than women in my industry. But I didn't see that as like a challenge to break. It's just like I was challenging myself. I just love working. I love exploring, new possibilities. Breaking new ground creatively is what I felt, and I didn't see anybody, deliberately in my way. I kind of saw them as, well, that's what guys say, like, well, you don't draw like a girl at all, or you draw great for a girl. And I like, well, rather than beat them up about it, it's sort of like, well, they were raised to feel that way. They were raised to see the world that way. And, what can I do? It's not for me to educate their whole life in another direction. It just was what we as women accepted and just dealt with.
So I sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, I forget where I was going.
There's the occasional delay, which sounds like I'm talking over you, which preempts 10 minutes of mansplaining and stuff like that. I can do all of that, don't worry. But to turn this then completely the other way to like a huge positive and a massive career success. Reading about the background of Shrek, and I mean, I mentioned Shrek, and like people instantly know what we're talking about. It's as recognizable as like all around the world. And I read stories about how 3,000 pages of material have been done over a period of 3 years before you and Andrew Adamson came in. It'd gone through an abundance of directors had been talking about it. No one had managed to crack it at all. And then you and Andrew Adamson found a way through to do this. I'm loath to keep the question as simple as looking back now, what was it? But looking back now, what was it?
It was a lot of people, really. It was the atmosphere at the time too. It's like catching lightning in a bottle, as they say. It was just a lot of different things colliding at once. Andrew was on the movie maybe a year before me. I was a story artist. I came in right after doing production design and story work on the El Dorado, the DreamWorks movie, and the story was a little bit in a holding pattern. It was still a bit of an action adventure. There was the ogre who wanted to be a knight, but no one wanted him to be a knight, and things like there are a lot of these things that were happening in it. But there were some story artists that I'd worked with before on Ren and Stimpy in there, working on the team. Yeah. And when I saw a screening, there were some scenes that were just so Ren and Stimpy, just so absurd, like, board artists like Ken Bruce and Cody Cameron and Conrad Vernon, and this just ridiculous, like unexpected humor. And then other things was very gallant, and Shrek was trying to, be a knight and freaking people out and stuff. So the producers had looked at me as like the new eyes on the movie because I was going to join the story team. Like, so how do we get those goofy scenes to fit into this? And I think I said something like, I think you need to get rid of those scenes and just do the goofy ones.
Yeah.
I was loud. I was brash. I was opinionated. And so Jeffrey Katzenberg made me a director.
The story I've got as well was that this was when DreamWorks' digital films were CG animated films were being done at a separate facility at PDI.
Ants was up there, right?
Yeah, Ants. Yeah. So were you making it in the same building as the rest of DreamWorks? Was there a degree of they're only going to come and look at us for 2-3 days a week, and the rest of the week we kind of can just try stuff?
Yeah, I think that may have helped a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
the story team and us as directors, we were in the Glendale facility, and then once we had a screening where we got this weird fractured fairy tale tone going, where the first time we played with the idea of the fairy tale creatures, for instance, coming to Shrek as refugees, you know, and squatting on his land. It was all super rough drawings and all of this. And once we got it, like, okay, I think that's the story. I think we're ready. Then we went up north, and so we were, continuing to hone the story and the details and the funnies, and that's what happens in animation. You continue to work story even as you're starting to put scenes into production. But it did feel a little bit like we were away from mom and dad, you know.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to some of the Aardman team on Chicken Run, and Katzenberg would fly into like a small local airport just next door. And it's just like all the time when he wasn't there, they could just try loads of stuff, and then they knew when he was there. I've interviewed Jeffrey Katzenberg. I found him a fascinating man. The bit
I love him, honestly.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. I mean, the brain on him's scary, terrifying, and not in a bad way. I don't mean.
You know, he's a card counter.
I believe you.
Yeah,
I believe you.
He got banned from Vegas at one point.
Is that right?
Yes. He was, I guess this is real quick, but he was on a campaign for somebody in New York. And when they lost, somebody came to him and said, hey, we know you can count cards. Can you earn us a bunch of money in Vegas? Like, yeah, sure, I'll try it. So they funded him, and he was, and because he can count like 4 decks, or I don't know. He's an alien, I'm convinced.
Is this finally? I've done 400 odd episodes of this podcast. Is this the one that finally gets me sued? I'm getting there. Can I ask this about Shrek? Because I think this is one of the extraordinary things that's overlooked. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah.
And I read a report of that screening of Shrek at the Cannes Film Festival. You all sat there in a row, and for 10 minutes you didn't know if the audience was getting it, because you didn't know if the humor was playing to that audience, if they were all very highbrow or whatever. Can you tell me your version of that, of your debut film? I'm sure loads of people ask you about the Oscar, so I'm going for Cannes. What was it like, your debut film screening at the Cannes Film Festival?
It was very surreal from just landing in Cannes to, it was all surreal. I mean, one, I got the fairy tale starlet experience where somebody showed up at the hotel with diamonds. Would you wear these diamonds on the
Was there a Christmas tree in the hotel as well? I want a Christmas tree. I want them to follow you around.
It was the summertime. And a guard was following me to make sure I didn't like run off to Rio with my diamonds. I didn't know there are guards that follow the stars when they're covered and all that stuff. But the stairs leading up to the theater, and the fans, outside the limo, and all of that was just surreal. And like, okay, fine, we're trespassing into this world. Let's just go ahead and enjoy it. Andrew and I are like, let's just take it in and take it. Who knows what's going to happen. But I think the story of it being such a delay, it wasn't like 10 minutes. I think because there was a lot being translated into French, that it took a moment for where we would hear a laugh, usually like right away. They had to finish reading it, and then the laugh would come.
Oh, interesting.
That's how I remember it. So, it just seemed like, are they getting, or are they getting, there's the laugh. Okay, phew. But then we got this, the one thing about Cannes is that it celebrates the directors, and we did not know that. So they brought a camera in to the theater right at the end of the movie and put it on Andrew and me, and with lights on, and people just stand and applaud, and your faces are being projected outside the theater to the crowd, and you just stand there and take it. It's a fantastic ego experience, that we were allowed to experience. It's just crazy. It was just crazy the way they celebrate the directors there. It was a really gratifying feeling.
We're pretty much out of time, and I've asked you 10% of the questions I'd written, so I'm going to track
I
you
told
down.
you I was
and
long-winded.
This is amazing. I'm going to track you down and see if I can get you back on this podcast, because there's tons I
Anytime.
want to talk about.
Anytime.
But if I can bring it back to Spellbound, your brand new film. If we can wrap up, if you can just tell people, I don't know, what it is that's special about Spellbound to you. Let's keep it that simple, and that seems like a nice place to leave it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Spellbound for me has just been an extraordinary experience. I feel that it's a story told. I think it's very entertaining and very loving and very fun, and ultimately it gives families a chance to see each other in a new light. And I hope they take away, singing the songs, feeling good about seeing the movie. I know because of its subject matter, some parents might feel like, I want to watch it first, make sure it's okay for my kids. No, everybody knows a family that's going through separations. Everybody knows kids whose parents are divorced. I'm just going for the spoilers here. I don't care.
Yep.
And I think this movie treats it in a way that will make talking about this topic timeless, that it's ultimately about love, that love is what really binds a family together. Love, respect, and being seen and heard and feeling loved by every member in the family is what's important.
Oscar-winning Vicky Jenson, owner of A New Christmas Tree. This has been an absolute delight. Huge congratulations on your film, and I hope we get you back on this podcast again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Anytime.
I will try, because I got through about a quarter of my questions at the absolute best. She was indeed sat in front of a Christmas tree. I know that doesn't always come across in audio, but I wasn't making all of this up. Spellbound is available on Netflix to watch, an animated family movie that should be landing just at the point this podcast is coming out. And that brings to the end this latest episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, you can find more from me on Blue Sky at Simon Brew, more from Film Stories on Blue Sky at Film Stories. We're at youtube.com/Film Stories online, youtube.com/Film Stories. Get me. Facebook.com/Film Stories online. If you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, a new merchandise might just be sneaking out if you're a very, very quick listener to this particular episode. If you go to filmstories.co.uk, a clickbait-free entertainment website. Imagine that in the modern world. There is one. It's ours. We're trying really hard. Thanks for all your support there. And thank you to everyone who backs me on Patreon. Patreon.com/Simon Brew, where you get episodes early pretty much every week. You get them ad-free as well. And you find out the mayhem going on behind the scenes. You can join in the conversation feature, which I managed to unlock there as well. But as always, I've outstayed my welcome, and so I'm going to leave you in peace. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. I will be back soon with more Film Stories. Bye-bye.